This event is known as the biggest charity event ever held. It's also the template for using music as a fundraising tool. Live Aid has developed a mythical existence over the decades, mainly because of a few iconic performances. For those not in the know, Live Aid was not, I repeat, not the first charity benefit concert, even though some people would have you believe that. Charity concerts have been around forever. There was George Harrison's 1971 concert for Bangladesh, which was two concerts that were held in New York City to aid refugees from East Pakistan who were struggling after Tropical Cyclone Bola, and also the Bangladesh war genocide that occurred. There were the late 1970s and early 1980s Secret Policemen's Balls concerts, which aided the British unit of Amnesty International. Live Aid, though, has stood the test of time and become one of those Generation X time markers, let's say. How did it get to that point? Well, what we're going to do is go back, way back in the time. Okay, actually, just back to the mid-1980s, when a journalist did a story that planted a seed that made all the difference. Starting in 1983, journalist Michael Burke was reporting on a famine in the country of Ethiopia for BBC News. The famine was part of the Ethiopian Civil War that had been going on since Ethiopian head of state Mengistu Haile Mariam seized power in 1978 until he was finally overthrown in 1991. On October 23, 1984, the BBC put one of Michael's reports on the air that struck a chord worldwide. It was about a nurse for one of the relief agencies named Claire Berkchinger. Her unenviable task was to help decide which out of over 85,000 people at a refugee camp would get the aid that day. It was her job to put marks on children who would receive the aid that day and who would live, while the vast majority would not get marks and would soon die. A 1984 diary entry that she made while she was stationed at a feeding station said, quote, "There are thousands of people outside. I have counted 10 rows, and each row has more than 100 people in, and I can only take 60 to 70 children today, but they all need to come in." End quote. It traumatized her so much that she didn't talk about it for over 20 years, finally saying in an interview, quote, "I felt like a Nazi sending people to the death camps. Why was I in this situation? Why was it possible in this time of plenty that some have food and some do not? It is not right." End quote. For her part, Claire retired in 2024 from nursing. Michael Burke's report about Claire and the famine moved the British public so much that people started giving tons of money to organizations like Save the Children. The report was also shown in America, which was unheard of back in the 1980s, as a lot of British television did not make American airwaves. Remember, this was all before the internet. The report also moved one particular man into action. Back in the early 1980s, Bob Geldof was known for being the lead singer of the group the Boomtown Rats. Their big hit was the song "I Don't Like Mondays." On October 23, 1984, he and his then-wife, Paula Yates, were watching that BBC report on the Ethiopian famine and decided to raise money to help with relief efforts. Bob got on the phone and called his friend Midge Ure from the group Ultravox. They got together a bunch of their famous friends, and on November 25th, they recorded a charity single that they wrote that month called "Do They Know It's Christmas," which was released on November 30th and went on to become one of the top 5 biggest-selling singles of all time, raising over $8 million for famine relief. The time frame from the BBC report being shown to the song coming out was right around 5 weeks. The song also inspired USA for Africa's "We Are the World," written by Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie. Among the artists who sang on "Do They Know It's Christmas" was Boy George of Culture Club. At the End of Culture Club show on December 22nd, 1984 at Wembley Stadium, Boy George sang a version of the song with some celebrities on stage. Boy George was so overcome with emotion that he contacted Bob Geldof and suggested that there should be a charity concert being held. Bob already had the wheels to this idea turning in his own head. In a January 1985 interview with Melody Maker magazine, Bob said, quote, "The show should be as big as is humanly possible. There's no point in just 5,000 fans turning up at Wembley. We need to have Wembley linked with Madison Square Gardens." Wrong word, it's garden, but whatever. And the whole show should be televised worldwide. It would be great for Duran to play 3 or 4 numbers at Wembley and then flick to Madison Square where Springsteen would be playing. And while he's on the Wembley stage, could be made ready for the next British act like the Thompsons or whoever. In that way, lots of acts could be featured and the television rights, tickets, and so on could raise a phenomenal amount of money. It's not an impossible idea and certainly one worth exploiting. End quote. By the way, the Thompsons he's referring to is the group the Thompson Twins, who were popular back then. Bob and Midge got to work. First, they hired promoter Harvey Goldsmith to do the Wembley concert and legendary promoter Bill Graham to do the American concert. Television producer Tony Verna got on board, and through his connections with Philadelphia's mayor, he secured Philly's John F. Kennedy Stadium for the event. Through his TV network connections, he got ABC Television to broadcast a 3-hour primetime live version of the American portion with tape-delayed British performances. Dick Clark hosted the American broadcast. MTV handled almost all of both concerts if you had cable, and not a lot of people did back then. But if you had it, then it was pretty much an all-day event for you. The way that Bob got a lot of the performers to do the shows was, well, okay, he lied to them. He would tell one guy that another guy was going to do the show, and then he'd get on the phone to the other guy and say that the first guy was going to do the show. They were also going to try to do a live duet between David Bowie in London and Mick Jagger in Philadelphia. However, with technology being what it was back in the day, they couldn't get the signals to sync up properly, so they completely abandoned that idea. Instead, they showed the music video of Bowie and Jagger's version of the Martha and the Vandellas hit song Dancing in the Streets and played it in both stadiums at the same time. The Wembley Stadium portion started at noon British time on July 13th, 1985 on the BBC with the words, quote, "It's 12 noon in London, 7 a.m. in Philadelphia, and around the world, it's time for Live Aid." End quote. The vast majority of it was heard in mono. You didn't watch it in stereo unless you were one of the fortunate ones who had an expensive stereo TV set. Remember, kids, this is 1985, mind you. If you were listening to it on the radio, then you got a stereo version. Also, the BBC version was commercial-free. The American version, on the other hand, was filled with commercials and commercials and commercials, and also interviews. So American audiences missed a bunch of performances, at least on ABC. Also, because some artists crossed over time-wise, certain acts like the reunion of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young were not shown. The Wembley show opened with the British Army Regiment, the Coldstream Guards, opening with the Royal Salute, which is the short version of God Save the King, which at this moment in time was God Save the Queen, but that's neither here nor there. Prince, now King Charles, and the late great Princess Diana were at the stadium for the beginning of the concert. Status Quo was the first band on stage. They did 3 songs. Also, it was the last time that Status Quo's lineup played together, as they lost bassist Alan Lancaster and drummer Pete Kirscher right after that. The Style Council played 4 songs, including You're the Best Thing and Walls Come Tumbling Down. Then the Boomtown Rats, complete with Bob Geldof, played next, singing I Don't Like Mondays and 2 other songs. Adam Ant did the song Viva La Rock. Later on, he criticized Live Aid as, quote, the death of rock and roll, end quote. If only he knew the Macarena was coming. Now that was the death of rock and roll. Midge Ure's band, Ultravox, was up after that. By this time in his friendship with Geldof, Midge felt a little pushed aside by Bob. As to Midge, it seemed like Bob wanted to take over the whole Live Aid project and to take all the credit and spotlight for himself. They've since made up. Then Spandau Ballet came out and did their 3 biggest hits. It was during this point that the American concerts started. More on those performances later. Then Elvis Costello did a version of the Beatles song All You Need Is Love. Nick Kershaw came up and did 4 songs, including his hit single Wouldn't It Be Good. Sade performed 3 songs. Sting, Phil Collins, and saxophonist Branford Marsalis performed together and did 4 Sting songs and 2 Phil Collins songs. Phil's performance was unique. He performed at both concerts and became the first artist to play concerts in Europe and America on the same exact day. After he finished his performances, Phil got to the airport in a helicopter and took the British Airways Concorde over to America, landed at Kennedy Airport in New York City, and then took a helicopter from New York City to Philadelphia and performed a set at Kennedy Stadium. For those not in the know, the Concorde was fully operational at that time and flew supersonic. Flight time between New York City and London was around 4 hours. The plane wouldn't be taken out of commission until 2003, and surprisingly, there has not been supersonic commercial aviation since. Strange. There was also another person who Phil picked up for his ride from New York to Philly. On that Concorde flight was Cher, who was somehow, some way oblivious to the fact that Live Aid was going on. Apparently, this woman just did not watch television or read a newspaper, even a full 3 weeks before the event. After she saw Phil on the plane, she wanted in. She went to the concert, stood by the side of the stage and watched, and then got up on stage when they all sang We Are the World at the end of the concert. Meanwhile, back at Wembley, Howard Jones did the song Hide and Seek. And then Brian Ferry and David Gilmour came on stage and did 4 songs, including Slave to Love and his cover of John Lennon's song Jealous Guy, which is a really good version. Paul Young then came on stage and did 4 songs. The intro to Do They Know It's Christmas, since he sang the opening line in the song. The song That's the Way Love Is with Alison Moyet, along with Every Time You Go Away and Come Back and Stay, his 2 big hits. The first memorable performance happened next. In a set that still gets talked about to this day, U2 performed 2 songs for 30 minutes, Sunday Bloody Sunday and an extra-long performance of the song Bad, where Bono went into the crowd and danced with a fan in the front part of the stage pit. U2 were relatively famous at that point, coming off of popular albums War in 1983 and The Unforgettable Fire in 1984. They would become even more well-known after this performance and become superstars with the 1987 album The Joshua Tree. Dire Straits then came on and did Money for Nothing and Sultans of Swing. When Sting walked out on stage to sing on Money for Nothing, MTV VJ Nina Blackwood famously said on air, quote, "What is Sting doing out there?" End quote. Completely forgetting for that moment that even though she had introduced the video to the song a million times on that channel, Sting was the one who sang the famous lyrics, "I Want My MTV" on the song, and he also co-wrote the song and was there to sing his lyrics live. After their set came the one part of Live Aid that everyone remembers, Queen, and the legend of the performance has only grown ever since. If you saw the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, then you already know what led up to the performance and what was at stake with Freddie Mercury's vocal cords and what a risk he was taking. As Tony Headley of Spandau Ballet said before the performance, all of the bands were just going through the motions. Queen were the group who took the moment seriously and gave a performance that was at one time voted the single greatest performance in rock music history. I personally would have gone with Jimi Hendrix at Monterey, but whatever. Let's be fair to the quality of music for Live Aid for a minute. As Bob Geldof has stated in interviews very recently, the music was not the point of the concert, at least not to him. He got all of those acts there so that they could make money for his charity. That was the whole point to the thing to begin with. The fact that people still remember Queen and U2's performances is a testament to what great performers they are. They always give their best. They never go through the motions. Queen started with part of Bohemian Rhapsody, Radio Gaga with the crowd clapping in unison, the famous call and response with the crowd, Hammer to Fall, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, We Will Rock You, and We Are the Champions. 1.5 hour that can only be described as goosebumps. Donations to organizations that collected for famine relief shot up after Queen's performance. David Bowie had to follow that up, but really, he's Bowie, so you know he kept the magic going. He performed TVC 15, Rebel Rebel, Modern Love, and Heroes. Bowie was going to do the song 5 years. However, there was a music video that he wanted played on the broadcast that showed starving kids and was set to the Cars hit song Drive. Bob Geldof said that there was no time on the schedule, so Bowie said that he would cut one of his songs out of his set in exchange for having that music video played. After that music video was played on air, donations really started pouring in. Then came The Who did 4 songs and whose television feed cut out for a minute because of a blown fuse in the middle of My Generation, right as Roger Daltrey sang Why Don't You All Fade Away? Kinda apropos. Elton John did 6 songs, including Don't Go Breaking My Heart with Kiki D and Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me with Wham, who strangely didn't do a set of their own music at the concert. Freddie Mercury and Brian May came back out to perform Is This the World We Created? Then Paul McCartney came out and performed Let It Be. Paul said that his management told him that he should do the concert, and by management he meant his kids. Organizers wanted a former Beatle to perform as they felt that it lent credit to the cause. After Paul finished, a bunch of performers sang Do They Know It's Christmas, and that was it. The British edition ended around 10 p.m. that night, 10 hours after it started. The American concert is the one that never seems to get talked about. We're not going to go over every set list like the British one because of that. We have, however, put the entire set list and start times for both the British and American concerts in the show notes if you want to check them out. We will note 4 things, though. First, a lot of British acts played in Philadelphia instead of London, like Eric Clapton, Duran Duran, Black Sabbath, Simple Minds, and Judas Priest. Second, there was a disastrous Led Zeppelin reunion with Phil Collins playing drums, which was so bad that when the concerts were issued on DVD, the band refused to allow their performance to be put on them. Therefore, if you didn't see it as it happened, you will never see it. At least not if Led Zeppelin continues to get their way. Phil Collins was blamed by Jimmy Page for how bad it was. Another group who also didn't want their performance to be shown is Santana, who also performed in Philly. Third, Run DMC was the only hip-hop act to perform there, as rap had not taken hold of the mainstream quite yet. It wasn't until the next year that they came out with the smash album Raising Hell, with, of course, the iconic song Walk This Way. They even referenced their Live Aid performance on that album with the classic song My Adidas, when they rapped, I stepped on stage at Live Aid, all the people gave an applause that paid. We'll get back to them in a few minutes. Fourth, Phil Collins finished his record-breaking performance by doing his set again in Philadelphia. There were other performances on the broadcast that weren't in either London or Philadelphia. Organizers held events on the same day worldwide. The groups Loudness and Off Course, along with 4 other artists, performed 6 songs in a studio in Japan. The group Australia for Africa performed 1 song in Vienna. B.B. King performed 4 songs in The Hague, Netherlands. The group Why You Rock Messiah performed a song in Belgrade in what was once called Yugoslavia and is now called Serbia. Autograph did 2 songs in Moscow. Band for Africa did 2 songs in Cologne, West Germany. Scavenger for Africa and Ferente Artister performed 2 songs in Norway. Kool and the Gang did 2 songs in a studio. Cliff Richard, who couldn't perform live at Wembley due to a prior concert commitment, instead did a performance via videotape. There was also a full festival that was held on the same day in Sydney, Australia, called Oz for Africa. The headliners for that festival were Men at Work, who were extremely popular back then, INXS just before they put out their late 1985 album Listen Like Thieves and then became superstars with the 1987 album Kick, and the Little River Band, who were already extremely popular in the 1970s in America, but somehow everybody forgot that they were actually an Australian band and not American. Go figure. The full set list and presenters for all of those worldwide performances are also in the show notes if you want to check them out. There were some criticisms of the performances. Aside from Led Zeppelin, Bob Dylan came under fire. During the intro to the song When the Ship Comes In, Bob said, quote, "I hope that some of the money that's raised for the people in Africa, maybe they can just take a little bit of it, maybe 1 or 2 million maybe, and use it, say, to pay the mortgages on some of the farms that the farmers here owe to the banks." End quote. Dylan caught a lot of heat for suggesting that and later apologized for it, saying that it wasn't the time or place to say something like that. But while the comment was criticized, it did plant an idea in the heads of John Mellencamp, Willie Nelson, and Neil Young to start the Farm Aid charity concerts to help American farmers. Some artists like Tears for Fears, Culture Club, Huey Lewis and the News, Deep Purple, Prince, Michael Jackson, and Bruce Springsteen either didn't think it was a worthy enough event to be a part of, Tears for Fears, Bruce Springsteen, Ritchie Blackmore of Deep Purple, Huey Lewis and the News, didn't want to appear in person but donated songs or videos, Culture Club and Prince, were busy with prior commitments, Michael Jackson, Cliff Richard, were sick, Annie Lennox of Eurythmics actually had a throat infection and couldn't sing at all, or were upset at not being invited to play, Rush, Thin Lizzy, and Roger Waters, who was invited but only if he put Pink Floyd back together. He actually did end up putting Pink Floyd back together at least for one performance during one of the subsequent sequels to Live Aid. It was either Live Earth or Live 8. I believe it was Live 8, about 20 years after the fact. For those artists, doing shows for free just really wasn't their thing, regardless of whether it was serving the common good or not. Still others, like Adamant and BBC presenter Andy Kershaw, were at Live Aid, but later criticized the entire thing. One artist that Geldof was upset about showing up to the play was the Philadelphia hometown band, the Hooters, whose breakthrough album Nervous Night came out 3 months earlier and had the hit songs All You Zombies and the song And We Danced, both in the top 10, and had snagged the opening slot in America. Geldof didn't think they were popular enough. Go figure. Ironically, Bob Geldof opened up for the Hooters during a tour in 2004, so yeah. Funny how the world works. There was also criticism that while there were a lot of black performers at the American concert, only Sade was there in London. One would have figured that a more diverse lineup would have been good, especially if the concerts were to benefit a country in Africa. This criticism would be leveled against Geldof and crew again 20 years later when organizers were announcing the lineup for the 2005 Live 8 concert, which also had only one black performer, at least at the time of the announcements. There were also accusations that funds were not going to relief groups but to Ethiopian government officials. Indeed, some money that was alleged to have gone to buy guns for the authoritarian government, and also there were accusations that food and medical supplies did not go to starving people but rather to parts of the population that supported the government. The more things change, the more they stay the same. History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. In any event, there was a 4-disc DVD set that came out in late 2004. Aside from Led Zeppelin and Santana, other artists were cut from the DVD release for whatever reason. Artists like Rick Springfield, The Hooters, Billy Ocean, Kool and the Gang, The Four Tops, and The Power Station. Still others had parts of their sets cut, like Madonna, who had a song cut. Some had parts re-recorded. For instance, Paul McCartney had microphone issues during his original performance of Let It Be. Being the smart performer that he is, and figuring that the event would come out on some format at some time in the future, Paul went into a studio 2 weeks after Live Aid and re-recorded his part of the song. The version on the DVD is the studio version. Also, Live Aid started their own YouTube channel, and you can watch some of the performances there, including a few that did not make the DVD cut, like Kool and the Gang's performance of their song Cherish, along with interviews and backstage stuff. It also had a good chunk of the international performances, and we will also throw that link to it in the show notes as well, because there's some really good stuff on there. And I believe they've also now added Live 8 and Live Earth concerts to that channel. Regardless of the criticism of the concerts or where the funds from the concert were going, the shows did do a lot of good. They raised over $150 million for famine relief. You can argue about whether it went to the right place or not. You can argue about whether the performances were any good or not. You can argue whether the whole event was just Bob Geldof's ego rung amok. What you can't argue is that Live Aid influenced other charity concerts and events such as Comic Relief and Farm Aid. It spawned the quote-unquote sequels, Live 8 in 2005 and Live Earth in 2007. Plus, it stood the test of time and become one of the most memorable concert events in pop culture history. Will something like Live Aid ever happen again? To be honest, I'm not sure. It was a different time back then, different circumstances, different political factions. And while there are festivals, including the yearly Global Citizen Concert in Central Park every summer in New York City that draw attention to certain issues, I'm not sure that anyone these days, except for maybe a global company like Live Nation, could or would even attempt to do an event that has worldwide contributions and is for a good cause. Plus, the world seems to be veering into a far-right society, especially in Europe and America, where people can't even agree on lunch, let alone on helping people who are less fortunate. So, I'm not sure that the right dedication is there at the moment. I could be wrong. I certainly hope I'm wrong anyway. The legendary, iconic concert event that was Live Aid, held in London, England, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on July 13th, 1985.